purpose. We've got Doctors Without, or Doctors of Our World, Médecins Sans Frontières.
Médecins Sans Frontières, Insan Wissam Tarif, who was originally one of the Avaz campaign managers. You have Amnesty International, Médecins Sans Frontières, Medics Under Fire, Syria campaign, Planet Syria, all of these offshoots from these various NGOs, and of course the White Helmets.
And so moving on from here, now we're just going to show this as an example. Human Rights Watch has a really great profile, especially in Hollywood. A lot of celebrities support Human Rights Watch, and in the past year it's been interesting. The head of Human Rights Watch, his name is Ken Roth. He's been what he's been saying in public, it's almost completely in lockstep, streamlined with what is coming out of the State Department. So with regards to Syria, Ken Roth, we have an example here, unfortunately has been caught on multiple occasions tweeting fake photographs. This is the head of one of the biggest, most high-profile human rights charities in the world, is routinely putting out fake images, misrepresenting the conflict in Syria in order to clearly demonize the government in Damascus, which is exactly what the State Department is doing. He seems to be somehow completely synchronized with what the State Department is doing. There's a revolving door between the U.S. government and some of these organizations, which will show
one of
you.
The directors, of course, of HRW is a former CIA director, and so there is a very clear revolving door. Another director is Solana, who was one of the war criminals from Kosovo, of course. So
General Solana, from NATO.
So the board itself is questionable. The funding is certainly questionable. It had seed funding, massive seed funding from George Soros, to enable it to exponentially grow its global influence. And then, of course, it had funding from Saudi Arabia.
And moving on from this, smart power, this term, formerly soft power, as far as we can find, this term was coined by Suzanne Nocelle. She's a very interesting person. She's a high-powered public relations person who was working in the U.S. State Department in 2012 and then suddenly running Amnesty USA in 2012. So there's a revolving door. And while Amnesty was holding what they called a shadow summit to the NATO summit in Chicago in 2012, and they ran this ad. And this is quite incredible. So NATO, keep the progress going. So the argument Amnesty was making on behalf of NATO was that NATO's occupation and military operation in Afghanistan is helping women. And so this is the kind of backing the feminist war, if you will, in Afghanistan.
Gender equality, gender issues are always at the forefront of a lot of these NGO campaigns.
And so Susan Nocelle, formerly of the U.S. State Department, walks straight into Amnesty, and all of a sudden this appears in marketing campaigns. So we can see, again, not only a revolving door, a total synchronization. Here's another example. This is Amnesty. No more excuses. Russia needs to stop supporting Syria, stop supporting the government of Syria. So this is Amnesty doing exactly as the U.S. State Department is doing.
It's always working in synergy with the U.S. State Department objectives. And in fact, if we take this as an example, this was taken from a very recent Wilson Center academic think tank in the U.S. paper. In some countries, local NGOs have also been funded to mount people power campaigns. As in the recent color revolutions, these campaigns are aimed at opening up political regimes to opposition parties and ousting leaders considered undesirable. I mean, this is kind of quite an extraordinary document in the sense that it very clearly outlines what the NGO complex is being used for. Opening up a country, it's cracking the nut. We're back to Stephanie McMillan's brilliant analogy, cracking the nation nut. Literally, it's opening it up and allowing this funding, this political influence, this economic influence to come into that country.
And another organization that's helped to crack the nut, so to speak, is Avaz. So we've got, this is another campaign. Now, this appeared in, I think it was 2012, 2013, and also saw this extended into 2014. This is calling for a no-fly zone and then a safe zone, which then became recently a no-bombing zone in Syria. So this is Avaaz collecting petition signatures from young people, I would imagine, millennials in Western countries, tapping into their wanting to help these poor people. But you see how they're marketing it with these evocative photographs, man holding girl. It's absolutely perfect.
And then let's look at who's behind Avaaz. Again, you have the Soros funding, you have the Democratic Party funding through MoveOn.org, and really you have the founders, very much hail Harvard, Ivy League, real sort of high-flying Forbes magazine guys.
And we have one here.
Yeah. Tom
Perrione with President Obama. This is during his Virginia, I believe, Congress congressional campaign. So he's a Yale grad. He's head of Purpose, or founder of Purpose.
He's founder of Avaaz. The founder members of Avaaz are founder members of Purpose.
And Purpose is
Purpose works
PR?
in partnership with Open Society Foundation. Purpose is basically a Manhattan advertising agent. In charge of behavioural change. They're agents of change, both Avaaz and Purpose, but Purpose has a role very much in the slick marketing campaigns that are then employed by all of these NGOs that have sort of basically branched from Avaaz and Purpose, like the Syria campaign, like Medics Under Fire, like Free Syria Voices, and of course the White Helmets. And in fact, this quote from Corey Morningstar is perfect. We are talking about, and this is very much Avaaz, the Ivy League bourgeoisie who sit at the helm of the non-profit industrial complex will one day be known simply as charismatic architects of death. And, this is a very, very powerful statement.
One of the best examples of this, and I wanted to pull this also dovetails with the earlier the Pontiac chief quote about what the missionaries used to do. In 2012, there was Invisible Children was the name of the charity, and basically they produced films, and one of them was Coney 2012. And there are links between this organization and I believe Liberty University. This is an evangelical university, the World Ecumenical Church, working in Uganda, and some of the people in those organizations also with Invisible Children. And again, this is showing the church link actually still active in the missionary organizations in Africa, uses as kind of Trojan horses. What Coney 2012 did, and we'll go back and we'll look at this image again, and they managed to convince thousands of American school children to empty their piggy banks and raise money to basically find Joseph Kony, some African warlord who we're told was impressing child soldiers who no one had actually seen for 6 years, and many people believe he was already dead by the time this campaign ran. But they got children to do campaigns like this: "We will fight war," and literally lobbying the White House to intervene in Uganda, and they did it. In the end, President Obama deployed 200-something special forces troops to Uganda. So although Coney 2012 collapsed as a fraud, I believe the person heading that charity had a nervous breakdown in public. It was very embarrassing, but they did get their troops on the ground, and this was just PR for a military footprint in Africa.
If we look at how Avaaz work in Syria, it's a very similar process. We look at, we know perfectly well that it's the US and NATO that have Syria regime change in their sights. So they will then create, for instance, as we've just been talking about, Purpose. Purpose is a Manhattan marketing agent, behavioral change agent. They in turn created the Syria campaign. Bear in mind, this is all still also from the Avaaz route. It's just here that we're seeing Avaaz comes in at the end of the process.
You've got a diagram here, I believe.
Yeah.
Walk us through this.
Yeah. Well, basically, as I said, we start off with the target nation, the US and NATO desiring regime change in Syria. Then we have the creation of the marketing arm of this operation, purpose, who then in turn create the Syria campaign, an NGO that will sort of funnel these emotive issues back through to us, who then in turn create the Syrian White Helmets, the Syrian Civil Defense, an NGO on the ground, first responders on the ground inside Syria. These are then trumpeted and described as saviors, as heroes of all humanity by the media, in this case by New York Times, Nicholas Kristof. They are then on the ground in specific target areas, calling, of course, describing, for instance, in this case, regime attacks, air attacks, the barrel bombs, the ubiquitous barrel bomb, and of course, calling for what they all want, which is a no-fly zone. Again, we're back to being in absolute synergy with the US and NATO agenda inside Syria. And then, of course, you have a vast behavioral change agents, consensus reality change agents, producing the petitions that, if we go back, we then have this situation again, triggered by the Avaz petition, and this whole process shows how it works.
Here's the latest campaign. Yep. Aleppo is burning.
Yeah.
So how many hundreds of thousands of dollars are spent pushing this around the globe?
Yeah, literally.
What is it for? What is the object here?
We have it very clearly stated there, a no bomb zone. So as we've progressively, or as US and NATO have failed consummately to achieve the no-fly zone, the safe zone, this is it's instigated by another false flag that has been demonstrated by various articles on 21st Century Wire, that Al-Quds, the hospital that was allegedly bombed by regime or Russian airstrikes, in fact, it certainly didn't exist before the war against Syria started. So it's a temporary hospital, triage center, embedded in the al-Nusra held areas and manned by the White Helmets. And to a huge extent, we know also that MSF does not have legally any hospitals inside Syria. It has supported hospitals exclusively, again, in terrorist-held areas. So this entire false flag was to raise, yet again, a petition and a campaign to achieve a no-bomb zone, backed by or created by Anna Press. Anna Press is, again, another NGO that is funded indirectly by George Soros. So we see his finger in this pie again.
More than 200 civilians killed in 1 week of airstrikes. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights hashtag, Aleppo is burning. More marketing.
Very emotive images, picked up immediately and run with by the usual suspects, BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, SOHR, all of these organizations that, again, you can never ever disentangle them from the US and UK objectives. And, if we look at this, it's actually disgusting, because more than 200 civilians killed, yes, but by the terrorist hell cannon, the gas cannons, filled with explosives and glass and shrapnel, fired on a daily basis into the 90% of Aleppo civilians that are taking shelter in the government-held western sectors of Aleppo. So again,
which charities like Human Rights are, these are so-called moderate rebels, really terrorists, firing crude hell cannon munitions. Human Rights Watch will say that's barrel bombs being dropped by the regime, by the Assad regime. So,
despite evidence,
total deception.
Complete deception, and despite evidence from citizens inside Aleppo that are saying there are no airstrikes. You're making these claims. There are no aeroplanes flying over Aleppo right now. All there are these hell cannon missiles that are being fired into particularly the Christian and the Kurdish sectors in Aleppo on a daily basis.
Laying siege to people in government-held areas.
They are blockaded by those terrorist factions.
So this is, let's look at one of the main, probably the best case study, and this is something that you've really focused in on in your work, the White Helmets. Let's briefly just give us an overview here of these images.
Yeah, let's have a run through. This is very much all part of their propaganda campaign, remembering, of course, Soros, that this entire campaign is overseen by Purpose, that is really one of the top marketing agencies in the United States.
Look at this.
Yeah, so invested in life.
This is perfect. We've got a cute child covered in dust, with blood dripping. I don't see the cut where it's dripping from, but there's blood there. We've seen the similar sort of very theatrical.
Yeah.
It's very theatrical. It's great. If you see this on a billboard,
it's a perfect photo shoot.
It's very nice.
Perfect. No gender issues within the white helmets.
Beautiful young models here.
Yeah. Who, by the way, we very rarely see in any of the actual so-called operational photographs. I've yet to see these girls actually.
Not rarely, they don't exist.
No, I'm just saying I've never seen them in any of the white helmet promo videos.
But these girls here, they fronted I think it was a crowdfunding campaign to raise money for the white helmets. So that's interesting. Again,
we're tapping in. Again, like if you look at these images, the use of children. The future of Syria is, according to this advertising campaign, the children. But the children as white helmets. So this is a very clear connection between a Western-backed NGO and the future of a country. And of course, we have to have the cat factor, the sentimental factor, if you like, rescuing the cats from the rubble. I'm smiling, but this is a genuine campaign, and in fact, a genuine campaign was run to try and humanize the Free Syrian Army.
Under attack for saving lives. So again, we have the actor or the person here with the charcoal on the face looking up into the abyss, and they've just done a rescue job. So we're told here against the white helmets.
We are from the people and for the people. Again, very emotive, very heart-tugging taglines, real sound bites. Which people do love to see. And yet, the white helmets are exclusively, again, embedded in ISIS and al-Nusra, which is Al-Qaeda in Syria areas. They do not operate in any other areas inside Syria.
So they run triage for these people here.
Yeah.
Let's look a little bit closer at this organization. Just tell us a little bit more about what we have here in the next images.
Well, they have this year again been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, which is an extraordinary process, really. If we start to have a look at the actual background to this organization, funded by USA, the United States government, and the British government.
So $23 million, as far as I know so far, from USAID into these white helmets. And another
£19 million from the British government, from the UK Foreign Office, into the White Helmets, set up by James Le Mesurier, a British mercenary, left the British Army in 2000, then had a fairly checkered career throughout pretty much all of the NATO target nations, so Kosovo, Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on.
So this is a so-called first responder NGO started by a top, if not the top-ranking military intelligence operative in the British Army, James Le Mesurier, pictured there.
And again, he also set up another search and rescue NGO, Mayday Rescue, which is also UK government funded. If we then go very quickly into his background, in particular, he worked for a company called Olive Group in 2005 that had private security agency contracts in Iraq with Bechtel after the Iraq War. I think it was about 58 million they were awarded. In 2015, they merged with Constellas. Constellas had under its umbrella Academy. Academy, of course, you will know better, is Blackwater mercenaries that are also being deployed in Yemen right now, and have a pretty dark history. Blackwater were in fact the outsourced assassins for the CIA. They were created during Bush's era, but Obama himself awarded them $250 million to continue carrying out unspecified operations for the CIA. No need to really explain what they are. In 2008, James Messerier started working with Good Harbor International, which is Richard A. Clarke, Bush's terror advisor. But the interesting thing here, he has long-standing connections with Rita Katz, a US-Israeli operative who set up site intelligence. Site intelligence are the diffusers or the producers, not the producers, but they put out the ISIS execution videos.
Yeah, they're the media arm of we're told anyway, of the Western intelligence establishment who get exclusives on every terrorist video that gets released.
And site will always get hold of them.
So we can see the picture forming here of a kind of a whole controlled matrix, a full spectrum dominance kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly, I mean, if nothing else, this entire matrix here, this labyrinth of connections, should surely make us question the impartiality and the neutrality of these first responders that are embedded with ISIS and al-Nusra, al-Qaeda inside Syria. Maybe we could explain that if we didn't have this entire apparatus behind them, driving them. And if we look at one of the leaders, now of Mayday, but he was originally with the White Helmets, Farouk al-Habib, again, he's with the Syrian opposition, again, goes back to CIA funding, because again, what did we talk about? The CIA as the government outreach agency, the long arm, the one that is funding those opposition parties to undermine an undesirable regime or government.
And arming them
as
well.
Absolutely. And then if we look at Raed Salah, who is one of the leaders of the White Helmets, and he's the one that has been most vociferous in the UN and in various government think tanks and meeting halls. He's recently been deported from the United States, from Dulles Airport, where he was going to pick up an award from Relief International and Interaction. And the reasons finally given, after a couple of weeks of sort of not knowing what was going on, by Mark Toner, the United States Department spokesperson, and he eventually admitted that he'd been deported because of extremist connections. And however, he made this extraordinary statement that although the leader of this group of first responders had been associated with extremists, the group somehow escaped any such association, which is extraordinary when you consider that Bush has basically leveled two nations to the ground because of their supposed or alleged connections to extremism.
Let's look at some of those connections really quickly to extremism.
Well,
so just again, James Messerier, this was going on in Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Kosovo after the war. So he would have been involved in this type of rebuilding a society, and in some cases that society has already been kind of constructed through NGOs and third sector organizations and UN programs and so forth. So this is what happened there in that part of the world. So again, here we have Raed Salah with the London Fire Brigade. Interesting story.
In February 2016, just prior to the Syria Support Conference, which was attended, of course, by Raed Salah, James Messerier, and which raised billions. George Soros was photographed there, supposedly to create what is fundamentally a shadow state in Syria. So it's backing all of those opposition parties, all of those first responders on the ground. The Free Syrian Police has been given over $2.5 million by the British government. Syria Forum, which is Canadian government and Qatari government-backed NGO, is creating or supporting local administration councils in Syria, so creating satellite governments from the central government. In other words, it is basically the creation of a shadow state. You have shadow police, you have shadow first responders, or, as we may also say, shadow military.
So they're preparing to sever the connections of these areas with the actual nation of Syria by constructing this shadow state. They're attempting through NGOs. So let's look at who else have we got here? I know you've got a few more images to share with us.
Here we have, obviously, the Daily Telegraph, after one of our articles, actually admitted that the White Helmets are embedded with ISIS as well as with al-Nusra. Here, an image of, but this was basically bearing in mind that the White Helmets make this claim that they are non-sectarian, that they are impartial, that they have risked their own lives under sniper fire to bring the bodies of Syrian Arab army soldiers back for burial. Here, and I don't think we can actually play the video right now, but here you actually see two white helmet operatives standing on top of these bodies of Syrian Arab army soldiers and basically flicking the victory V as they're driven off in a pretty sort of devastating state.
So we have an NGO here that millions of dollars are spent marketing it, inflating its public image, and whose members are moonlighting with Al-Qaeda in Syria. That's quite an interesting proposition.
Yeah, and this is very indicative, and I think what Syria, unfortunately, through the shedding of their blood in this conflict, in this war of aggression against them, they're acting as a litmus paper of the sheer level to which US and NATO have gone to deceive the public. The White Helmets are perceived as these first responders since 9/11. They're almost untouchable.
Yeah, the whole class of first responder and firemen, people who, landmine diffusers, like saints, basically. They have that status in terms of public relations. Yeah. So, looking at the big picture, is this what it's all about? We've got a map here.
Yeah. I mean, and we also need to consider that one of the other seed funders of this entire campaign, Syria campaign, and particularly Syria campaign, is Ayman Aspari, who has, he's billionaire CEO of Petrofac, that has invested interests in BP and Shell inside Syria. So again, it's interesting that we see again this synergy between these agendas and objectives, and the majority of it is, of course, there are other agendas there, but it is to prevent Russia from creating the Iran-Syria pipeline, which of course would completely scupper the Qatari pipeline that is being supported and endorsed by the United States. So yes, this is one of the nucleus objectives.
And there's a number of pipeline, I might add, a number of pipeline projects. This is one of the main, two of the main ones here, which absolutely, in my opinion anyway, and many other analysts as well, is playing a central role behind the scenes in the motivations of what is the Western agenda. But again, we come back to the road to tyranny is paved with good intentions. None of this, we look at this map, none of this would be possible without the smart power NGO complex. Save from direct military, Iraq-style direct bombing, invasion, occupation, that's off the table in 2016 and 2015. But this, through stealth measures, through public relations, through marketing.
Predatory humanitarianism.
Predatory humanitarianism. This is all on the table right now, and we're seeing it play out today. And there's been a number of examples of this. So, Vanessa, we want to thank you for your work on this subject, and we also want to encourage everyone to research and learn more about this very important subject, because this issue especially